everybody, and welcome to the inaugural episode of the Casual Gaming Society. I am player two. I'm sorry, player one of two players here. Uh, my name is John. John, how are you? With me this week, I am stealing so much from Ben right now, just even by the holy crap. Mr. Avery, if you're out there and you're listening, just know that your influence is far and wide and greater than I could even imagine. That being said, with me, my player two is Dave Clements. I think this podcast has been a long time coming.
Yeah.
We've been talking about doing something together for a while.
Yeah. So I'm the Tails to your Sonic then, right?
Maybe you're the Lennon to my McCartney.
Well, I'm dead. That's sad. Are you implying something?
No, I didn't really take that into account when I made the analogy.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Hi, I'm Dave.
And this is the brand new segment of Geek Devotions they've been hinting at for a while. That's going to be replacing Primitive Rhythm Machine. And we want to talk about gaming. And we figured, hey, what's the best place to start with this other than introducing ourselves from the perspective of gaming? So let's do that. Dave, why don't you go first, because people have been listening to me so far.
Yeah. Because I'm new to the whole Geek Devotions thing for the most part. I don't think I've ever been on any other shows.
Not for a lack of trying. We tried to get you on the bottom shelf
I know.
in June to talk about the Mortal Kombat movies.
It's true. But yeah, I'll just kind of jump in and give kind of an introduction of who I am. I'm actually a longtime podcaster. I've been going for about 10 years now. Started with a show called Geek This, which kind of inspired this. This is kind of what started Casual Gamer Society. Josh, geez, I need to go take a nap. John and I, we've talked a little bit about, doing that show, and I was like, I don't want to do it anymore. So we kind of pivoted and we agreed that doing a show about gaming would be something different and something a little bit more fresh for myself and for John. And we call it Casual Gamer Society because we're not pro gamers. We just enjoy games, and I'm terrible at finishing games. So, yeah, this is going to be fun. And the general concept thus far is we're going to talk about the spectrum of games. We're going to talk about video games, probably predominantly. We're going to talk about tabletop role-playing games because John and I are both involved with a Dungeons and Dragons podcast you may have heard of, playing games with strangers. And
if they've heard anything that I've done, if they've heard anything I've done on Geek Devotions, they've heard me mention it.
I'm sorry. I'm not sorry. You should go listen to it. And then we're going to talk a little bit about board games because that is also classified as gaming. So now that I've kind of hogged that 5 minutes of your life, boy, I think the first time I was introduced to video games was probably the early 90s with my stepmom's Nintendo Entertainment System with, classic Super Mario Brothers. I think that's where gaming started, I think. And you're a little bit older than me, John. Not a lot.
Thanks for pointing it out, Dave. That was amazing of you to do.
You're like a Commodore 64 guy?
I video games actually have been kind of a part of my life as far back as I remember. The earliest in-home console I can remember is an Atari 2600 that my parents had.
Okay.
So I came in the generation before you.
Okay.
But I mean, even outside of that, I remember walking through places that, like, you would see a stand-up arcade cabinet, and I would be about that too. So
Yeah.
I can't really say I've been into video games since, because since before I started retaining memories, I guess. I don't
Right.
I don't know, but some of my earliest memories is playing the original pole position on the 2600, and
Mm-hmm.
there I and specific sessions like where I just could get the car going on almost an infinite loop around the track because I just adjusted to it. You know, the terrible Pac-Man ports and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think I think that's partly what's driven my opinion of content over graphics, because
Yeah.
I can guarantee you, man, if you wanted graphics, the Atari was not the way you wanted to go.
Would you say that, kind of with what you're saying as far as, content over graphics, would you say you lean more toward like retro gaming, or do you like the modern stuff better or equal, or how does that sit with you?
So with gaming for me, I approach it the same way that I approach music. If it's good, it's good. It stands on its own. You know, I
Okay.
don't have one specific thing that I cling to. There are older games that I enjoy. There are newer games that I enjoy. Um, you know, I can remember a couple of years ago I used to go to this one church where there's this one kid. You know, if it was anything that was older than 5 years, like it's just like, ugh, that song's old. It's not good anymore. And it's just like, no, music is good because it's good, not because it's got an expiration date on it.
Right.
Or, and it's the same thing with video games. Games are good because they're good, not because there's an expiration date. I can say at a certain point, um, you know, it, they don't. I have a hard time getting into them. Like if I was to go back and play some 2600 games now, I don't think I would have as much fun with them as I did at the time,
Mm-hmm.
mostly because I've found that games that are a little bit more story driven are my jam. Um, but I can also say that I have never owned a Nintendo system that didn't have the original version of The Legend of Zelda on it either.
Right.
Um, because let me tell you something, that game when it came out was life changing for me. Like I had the
Really?
original, yeah, I had the original golden cartridge for it. Um, you know, here I was in kindergarten, and when I was walking to school, I'd have the instruction booklet in my backpack, and I just sit there and stare at it and read it on repeat over and over again. So
Wild.
yeah, dude, the original Legend of Zelda. But at the time, it was so groundbreaking because it. I mean, as far as I know, it was the original open world game.
Yeah,
You
I,
could you
that
could
sounds right.
you could go to any level you wanted at any given moment, um, if you knew how to get there, and
Mm-hmm.
it was, you know, it was just such a thing. You legitimately got thrown into this world, and you a basic concept of what they wanted you to do and go,
Yeah.
and it wasn't based on the idea of, okay, let's see who can set a high score. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it was let your imagination go. And so I think that despite the fact that I've been a gamer all my existence, I think the original Legend of Zelda was the point where gaming really got its hooks on me, and it kind of showed me what a well thought out video game can with your imagination.
Okay. Interesting.
Did you, did you have a point like that in your own gamer development?
Uh, I don't, I can't say for sure that I did. I remember, so it's funny because it's like looking back on it, I feel like I've played just about every console um that's existed, you know, to some degree. I remember, even though like we had an NES at home because it was my stepmom's, and so I could play that pretty much whenever. I remember going to the back of the store that my grandpa owned, and it was basically the warehouse part of the store. And way in the back, like behind boxes, almost like this hidden wall, he had um a 2600. And like I remember just playing that all the time. And I think it's kind of the amalgamation of not so much the story, but how I felt playing. Um, Really just kind of being sucked into these imaginary worlds, whether it's, being a dot playing Pong, because that was a big thing that my brother and I would play, or playing Pitfall, or, you know, being on the NES and playing Super Mario Brothers and some other games. I I think it was just the immersion for me. It wasn't even about storytelling. But I think that moment really came when I played Super Mario Brothers 3 for the first time. That instantly became like it's kind of my Legend of Zelda, I guess. That makes sense.
Mhm.
Um, I think it was always more art driven for me than it ever was story. Like I don't the story for Zelda, it's like, okay, you save a princess. With Mario, it was you save a princess. Uh, there's probably other stuff along the way, but none of that ever really mattered to me. I think that's changing now.
Man, I loved Super Mario Brothers 3. That I remember when that game first came out, and like, do you remember the movie The Wizard? I think is what it's called, had Fred Savage in it.
Yeah, vaguely. Like I've seen it once or twice, but yeah, that was like the game in that movie.
Right, that was like the big game. I think that was like the big reveal in the game. Like, actually, the more I think about it, it's like The Wizard was like the biggest commercial for the NES, if I remember, because like the
Yeah.
the big bad in the game is just like, oh, he plays with the Power Glove, and it's just like,
Hmm.
ugh. Did you ever play with a Power Glove, by the way?
I don't think I ever did. I always wanted to.
I had one as a kid. They were hot trash. Like
Yeah.
they were like garbage and a half. They and I think that was where I learned my mistrust of Nintendo gimmickry
Yeah.
from an early age, because I had that and I had the Power Pad, which was that
The one you ran on?
yeah, the one
Yeah.
that you quote ran on.
Yeah. Playing
It,
track and field.
yeah, it was more it was the one that you got down on hands and knees and just slapped
Hmm.
the pad as
Right.
fast as you could with your hands.
Yep.
It was more a drumming thing than it was a run and place
Right.
situation.
Right. Yeah, man. I gaming is such a like I feel like like you, like I have memories from before I remember that I have memories
Hmm.
because I've played so many systems throughout the years. I guess I do want to kind of answer my own question as far as, you know, preference of, retro
Retro
gaming,
versus
modern
modern.
gaming. Yeah.
Hmm.
And I find myself leaning much more toward the kind of the modern era of gaming. And it's not because of graphics or anything like that. I just find a lot of the indie games that are coming out much more interesting because they really weren't available back in the day. But I do
Hmm.
have heavy nostalgia for some retro games because I think I told you it was a few weeks ago. There's a brand new Ninja Turtles. It was like a remake.
Shredder's Revenge, yeah.
Yeah, and I've loved playing it because I love beat 'em ups. That's what my brother and I played a lot
Uh-huh.
of
Uh-huh.
because it was just kind of the easy thing for more than one person to play. And you and I were talking on Discord, and you're like, "I think you sold me on not wanting to play it."
Yeah, well, because it's like, okay, so if you go back in the '80s and you're looking at, grade school me, yeah, beat 'em ups were kind of my jam when I was in an arcade setting,
Mhm.
and they're good for social games, but that's not really my gaming style now. So sitting on the couch playing a button masher is kind of it's like watching a Saw movie by yourself. It says something about you that I'm not sure I'm ready to make that statement.
Like really sad, little worried. Oh, that's me because that's well, we figured out what kind of a gamer I am. I'm a watch Saw by myself kind of gamer. So
No, no,
that's that's
I
what I
know
do.
your situation. You are an overworked father who gets his 5 minutes in when he can when it comes to gaming.
That's true. Uh,
So
but yeah, I have a fondness for retro games, but I do kind of get to a point where like right now like Nintendo has their Nintendo Switch Online um subscription and we have it and there's a bunch of NES and I don't remember if there's I think there's some Super NES. I can't even remember, but they're releasing games as part of the subscription
mhm.
and there are literally like 5 or 6 games out of all of them that I will go back and play, if I'm getting ready to go to bed, I take my Switch with me, I'm playing original Super Mario Brothers 3, Dr. Mario, and maybe one or two others. But like that's kind of as retro as I get.
Mhm.
And geez, I haven't played like a PS1 or 2 or 3 game in ages,
Mm.
if you consider that retro. So I don't know.
Well, I mean, anything's really retro if it's not the current gen. I mean, if you really want to think about it,
I guess that's
except for
true.
maybe the PS4, because the PS4, I don't remember which Xbox, the Xbone gen
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
that I think is still quasi current gen as well. But I mean, like PS3 era, 360. I think that's the beginning of where the retro line's at.
Yeah.
Um, well, and that the discussion of the consoles there, I think, is lead into another great introductory question, like what system, and because I know that you've hit a lot of systems, I've played through a few systems myself. Which system do you think was your favorite? I won't say best, but what was your favorite video game system as far as like video games, video games that really hit with you?
That's tough. It's got to be a tie between the Nintendo 64 and the GameCube. Those were very um I wouldn't even say nostalgic, but like I think that was also when gaming was starting to change. We're getting more into like the 3D worlds and things like that. Um I spent a lot of years playing those two systems.
Mm. Yeah, for me it was actually the SNES was the beginning of the, or not even the beginning. I mean, that was because the leap from the 8-bit systems to the 16-bit systems was massive. I mean, if you were there to see it when it happened,
Yeah.
um it was mind-blowing. Like I remember, like, because I remember that Christmas you either got a SNES or you got a Sega Genesis.
And I got a Sega Genesis.
And I remember the first time I heard someone turn on their Genesis with Sonic the Hedgehog in it, because that was the pack-in game, and
Mhm.
you heard them go Sega when they turned that on. Like, just the fact that they had that audio sample in there was mind blowing, because it's just
Mhm.
like those are real voices. It's not just some MIDI that someone put in there. So it was a big deal. But like with the SNES, though, I mean, when Nintendo put out their NES Classic and SNES Classic. Like NES Classic, I was kind of into the idea, um, just again because it had the original Legend of Zelda.
Right.
But with the SNES, I think that was where I developed my appreciation for video game role playing games, because that had stuff like the Chrono Triggers and Final Fantasy before it made its leap with Final Fantasy VII over to the Sony consoles instead.
Okay.
um it's also where you would, some rare legendary Nintendo RPGs like Super Mario RPG, and of course, in the same breath you got to talk about Earthbound.
It's funny. I've not played any of those. Never.
Were you much of an RPG player though back in the day though?
No, and I'm still really not. I mean, like tabletop role playing games, yes, but video game role
Mm-hmm.
playing games, not really. Like
Yeah.
I don't know. I think a lot of it for me was the combat
Mm-hmm.
systems. Like I hated the turn by turn thing. It drove me nuts,
Mm-hmm.
and so I've never really tried since then.
I would recommend more of a ARPG
Okay.
system for you, because they play out a little bit like beat 'em ups with their battle system. Like Rogue Galaxy on the PlayStation 3 was great for that. That was my first experience in an ARPG. But even outside of the RPGs, with the Super Nintendo, you had stuff like Super Mario World, the pack-in title for that.
Yeah.
That game was legendary for
Mm-hmm.
me. Yeah, and as far as platformers go, I think that was where the 2D platformer hit its pinnacle, was on
Yes.
Super Mario World.
Yeah.
And that was the biggest reason why I got a 3DS, was just because I wanted a way to play Super Mario World on the
Mm-hmm.
go, because that
Yeah.
game, that's like the ultimate chill game. That and the first Donkey Kong Country. but that was mostly because I wanted to sit in the water levels and just listen to the background music on that. Because that background music for the water levels in Donkey Kong Country was primo stuff.
Yeah, I actually was. It's really funny. I was so I've really been getting into like these YouTube channels where they're doing like, you know, they're flipping games and, you know, reselling and stuff like that. And the guy I was watching last night, he got like a collection of Donkey Kong SNES games.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at my wife and I was like, I don't like any of the Donkey Kong Country games. I don't know why. I think they just made me mad too many times. And I was like, nope, I'm out. I'm done. Forget this game. Uh, I played it every once in a while with my brother. Well, and that could possibly be part of the problem. Uh, he was not a very good Diddy. I'll just say that.
Now,
But
when you say brother, which one?
this would be Rick, my
Okay,
immediately younger,
okay. I have to
because I
ask
know
because
you know a couple of my brothers.
yeah,
Yeah.
you come from a large family.
Yeah, my gaming is yeah. I think usually most of my, you know, multiplayer gaming is done with Rick. He was kind of my wingman growing up with video games.
Yeah, I didn't really have a person to have a quote wingman with. And I think that's the other reason why I'm very much a campaign gamer rather than an online gamer too. Is just because, uh, amongst all my friends, I was the one who was like really into the video gaming. Everybody else wanted to be outside playing basketball or something, and me, I'm just like,
Gross.
I've got Street Fighter 2 on my SNES. You guys want to play that?
Yeah. Yeah.
And of course,
That was me at my mom's house.
I mean, and of
Go
course,
ahead.
nobody ever wanted to play that. So, um,
Yeah.
so, and that might have lent itself into my diversion away from the beat 'em ups. Now I think about it, just again playing beat 'em ups by yourself.
Yeah, I could understand that.
Where are the other three Ninja Turtles?
Yeah, yeah, I'm getting my butt kicked here. I could use, you know, Donatello. So okay, so I have to ask, which turtle would you pick as your character?
Raphael.
Yeah, I could see that. As a kid, it was always Michelangelo, but now it's Donatello.
Yeah, everybody liked Michelangelo as a kid because he was just like the party on, dude. And everybody
Yeah,
was
yeah,
about that, but especially in the '80s when they were first coming out. But I've noticed that
yeah.
when people grow up into adulthood, the majority of people's Ninja Turtle preferences, well, if they have a Ninja Turtle preference, I should say, because I mean the majority of people who grow out of that and be like, I don't know, I don't remember that. Uh, but but for those weirdos like us
Right.
who grow up and they're still into that, they very few of them stick with Michelangelo after the fact because he's not a smart guy.
No, no. He's very irresponsible, gets in a lot of trouble, and I don't need that in my life.
I've always had issues with Leonardo because, he's just too stick in the mud,
Hmm.
and has to have it his way. And I knew too many people like that growing up. And Donatello, there was just something about that personality of always going to my own knowledge, going to the book smarts and, well, actually, and that drove me nuts. So, that left me with Raphael, who was a little bit more intuitive, had a little bit more
Hmm.
of an attitude, a little bit more of a standoffish kind of guy. And then I'm starting to realize this says a lot about me as a person too, and I don't want to have this conversation. So I
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say, like, I feel like that I kind of am Donatello, like in some cases, not in all cases, but
right.
you know, if you're sitting down and you're watching a movie with me, you know, and you're like, hey, isn't that person from this movie or this TV show? And I'm like, no, actually, let me consult my internal IMDb, and it's actually this person from this. And did you know this fact? Like that's me.
How did you
But
not end up on the bottom shelf? I that just seems like, I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, maybe I'll be the replacement if somebody gets ejected.
Well,
So who knows? But um, just so everybody knows, we have not figured out exactly what the format of this show is. So it's going to be a lot of this casual talking about stuff. But I do have a question that might be something that we keep going.
All right.
Um, what are you playing right now?
Vampire.
Okay.
That's Vampyr.
All right.
Uh, uh, I have to do that because then people are be like Vampire the Masquerade, and I'll be like, no.
Right.
uh, this was a PS4 game. It takes place in like 1918, somewhere around there, during the First World War, um, in London, England. And you are a vampire. You're a doctor and you're a vampire, and you're trying to figure out a certain thing that's going on, which I don't want to spoil it because it's just not. You're a vampire, and there's a good and bad good and bad things you can do in there. Basically, are you going to kill this NPC or not kill this NPC? And that's going to
Mhm.
have ramifications on the story going forward because every NPC is a reoccurring NPC.
There you go. I started playing that. Guess what? I didn't finish it. Uh,
Shocker.
I know. I know. Well, like I have my office and I have my PlayStation in here right now, but I don't really have time to play up here in my office, and that would not be a game I can play with my kids running around. But I did start playing it and I did enjoy it. Um I on the other hand am currently playing uh I don't know, pick a system, John. PC or Xbox or Switch.
Let's do all three. Let's start with PC.
Okay. Because I am currently just dabbling in a bunch of games. On PC, I am playing a game called Graveyard Keeper, which it's a little macabre and I love it. I didn't expect to, but it's kind of one of those like kind of think Stardew Valley, kind of a survival crafting kind of thing, except you have like 400 different tasks you're working on all at once. General concept is you possibly, maybe, haven't been this far in the game to find out the answer, but potentially I in the modern world got hit by a car, I died, and then instead of going to heaven or hell, I assume I'm in limbo and I am in charge of a graveyard and a church and a bunch of other things. Uh, and it's kind of one of those cool games I can dig into because I love crafting and things like that. It's available on Switch and maybe some other platforms as well. Let's see. On Xbox, I have been playing House Flipper because it is new on Game Pass and it's exactly what it sounds like. You repair houses. I'm having a lot of fun. You don't seem very enthused about at least that game, John.
I you know I'm picking up on a lot of working sims, and it's just like, bro, I don't like to work when I'm getting paid for it. I'm not gonna pay somebody else to let me work some more.
There is something relaxing about House Flipper. Tearing down walls, you're repainting rooms, installing radiators in every single room because it was developed by some European developer.
and
Uh,
you know, and that's just it. If that's someone else's jam, that's cool. Just it's not my thing. I'm not into like chill games for the most part. Like recently, one of the big games that swept across a lot of the Geek community has been Animal Crossing New Horizon,
mhm.
and it's not my bag. I don't come to games. I don't come to games to chill out. I come to games because I need an adventure. I need some escapism. It's just like take me to another land and paint me pictures with your imagination. And
Yeah, yeah.
you know,
I get that. Then on the Switch, I've been really on a Pokemon kick. I don't know why. I was into the card game as a kid. I'm not really even playing the game, just simply trading cards with people.
mm,
We're talking like Gen 1 Pokemon. I was super into it. And then my oldest daughter got, well, actually, we bought Pokemon Sword and Shield for both of our girls so they could
mhm.
play together. And within like a week, I beat Pokemon Sword. And now I'm like working on a different Pokemon game. I think it's Let's Go Pikachu. So I don't know. I'm on a Pokemon kick right now.
Would you believe that I've never played a Pokemon game ever?
I would, although it would kind of surprise me considering, I guess technically that's an RPG
You know,
of
and
some sort.
you could say I'm Pokemon curious,
Hmm.
but the thing about it is there is so much lore that comes with the Pokemon games at this point, where it's just like, mm,
I mean, yeah. Here would be my advice to anybody who is interested in playing Pokemon like you, because for me, I was in that very same place where I was like, where do I start? Like, where we first games came back in like 96, I think
mhm.
96 or 97. So like we're looking at 25 years ago. Like that's a actually longer than that, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, doesn't matter. Um, but just find a game that, like, I would look at the starters, because that's kind of how a Pokemon game works. You get 3 starters to choose from. Pick a starter that you think is cool and just start with that game. Like, don't even worry about the lore, because as far as I know, they're not connected. Like, you can trade Pokemon from game to game, but
Mm,
other than that, just if you find one, like, do you still have your 3DS or
mhm,
whatever it was that you had?
mhm.
Yeah, I've there are multiple Pokemon games for the DS line, black and white. So, yeah, that's what I would do, is just if you can find one of those games, because you don't have a Switch, right?
No.
Okay. Yeah. I would
Yeah.
just find one of those games. Like, I think they're reasonably priced. Like, they're going up the older they get, but yeah, I would just find one of those and, Google whatever the starters are, and if you're like, "Hey, I like that fire type one," start there.
Hmm. It's the thought. I know I can't download them anymore because they shut down the DS store, but
Right.
that's something I've never quite understood. It's just like, yes, let's shut down a means of commerce,
Yeah.
but it is what it is. Being as we're talking about history and stuff like that, um, let's go back to the era of game genies for a second.
Yeah.
You want to talk about a part of the video game industry that was short lived for just in their moment. Um, did you ever play on a Game Genie or a Game Shark as it was that was the other brand that you could throw out there?
Yeah. I had an aunt that had a Game Genie. I think I bought a Game Shark for one system or another, and I think there's another one, Action Replay, I think was the other one,
Hmm.
that were kind of the thing. But yeah, oh man. I played Contra with like all cheats on, because I'm terrible at Contra for NES.
I can't think of anybody who I would say is good at Contra. You could, I mean, if anybody gets on you for using a Game Genie for Contra, I would just be like, did you use the up, up, down, down thing before
Right.
you played?
Yeah.
Because
Did you use the Konami code?
then you cheated too. I don't care who
Right.
you are.
Yeah.
Um, so I fault nobody for cheating at Contra, but um, like okay, so how do you explain one? How do you explain the game Genie to the younger audience out there? And two, how do you explain why it was like such a big deal back?
Oh man. I mean, to explain the game Genie, like, you have to have a basic understanding of the lineage of video games. So like if you look at your NES, all games were cartridges, plastic with a circuit board stuck inside of them. You jammed it down into a console. That's how you played your game. The Game Genie was kind of an in between, where you plugged the Game Genie in, then you plugged in your cartridge, and when you turned it on, there was a menu that you got to flip on different codes that were available. And they would be different cheats, like, infinite lives, or I don't know. That was
Take
kind of the
no
big one.
damage.
Right, right. You'd be invincible. Yeah, stuff like that. Or maybe you could even unlock, like, I think a big thing with Mario was um like they had like the warp zone pipes, but I think there was like a stage or world select in the Game Genie that you could just fire it up and, okay, well, I died on world 9. I didn't beat the game, so I'm just gonna start there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cheat codes. which is like, I don't even know that they exist outside of like having like a, super ramped up PC and you've downloaded software to be good at Call of Duty. I think that's the only cheating that exists anymore, and it's illegal.
Hmm. So, but that leaves the second half of the question though. First, so like, why was cheating, like buying these peripherals that were basically cheated the game for you and took you out of the enjoyment of the game just to as some people would put it, just to you know it basically was like cheating yourself essentially. Why were they such a big thing at the time? What do you think?
Video games were hard back
Yes, that is the
then.
correct answer.
Yeah, it wasn't just Contra. Like, they were like, I mean, for as simple as they were designed, or looked, I guess I could say, when you're looking at those eras of 8-bit and 16-bit games, those were like, looking at them now, they look cheap, or they look, you know like weenie games,
Hmm.
but they're not. Like, they're incredibly difficult.
They're tough
and
as nails, bro.
and okay, so like saves didn't exist. They would like flash up a code that was like 16 digits, depending on what era, like your NES era. Um, like they'd flash like a 16-digit code, and like there are people that still to this day have their NES notebook full of like, you know, these 16 digits take you to this save point in this particular game. And I think with the development of like Game Genie and things like that, it 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 could be used as a cheat, or it could be used as kind of a save point, so to speak. Because just to get really geeky if I can, the way that those cartridges worked is um the only way they could save is if there was like a little, basically a
Battery.
coin battery
Hmm.
in the cartridge. And if it didn't have that, you couldn't actually save the game.
Hmm.
So,
And that was the other revolutionary thing about the original Legend of Zelda cartridge is it was the first one to incorporate that battery to
mm,
maintain its memory on their four saves, which I grew up taking for granted because I remember the first time I played Resident Evil on a PlayStation. My buddy, it was the first time I ever played a PS1, first of all,
mhm.
and my buddy had rented the console from the local video store, and he had rented Resident Evil, and we got to the typewriter and it says please insert memory card. I'm like, where do you find the memory card in the game? And
Right,
it's just
right.
like what do you mean memory card? And then after the fact, I'm like, oh, you have to buy separate pieces of memory
Yeah,
because you
yeah,
can't save to a disc. And but of course, at the time I think I was like 11 or 12, and it's just like
yeah.
I'm an idiot.
No, I mean, looking at it now, you could say that, but like, it's amazing how much gaming has changed over, just say 30 years. I mean, 10 years even.
Hmm.
Like, what, 10 years ago is 2012. I mean, you're still at that point. We're on what,
PS3, Xbox
PS?
360.
Yeah. And like those consoles, like those seem so aged. Like, I have a 360, and I actually found one of the controllers the other day, and I was like, this controller feels so weird. Um just compared to my Series S controller, or even my PS4 controller. Like, it just feels weird.
They feel weird to me anyway. I've always had an issue with the Xbox controllers, and I'm talking about beyond just the Duke,
Oh, yeah.
but the staggered analog sticks just doesn't feel right to me. And I think it's because when I made my jump to the 32-bit systems, I started out with a PS1 with the
Mhm.
dual analog sticks, and of course I'm so used to them being parallel to each other.
Yeah.
Anytime I try to play with a Xbox controller on anything, a PC or an Xbox, it's just don't like it. Nothing's where it should be.
Yeah, I can understand that. I mean, I've got a PS4, but having my Xbox and my Switch, that's actually the the weirdest thing, because they do have the staggered analog sticks, but the A and B are switched. So
Mhm.
if I play my Xbox for too long and then go to my Switch, then I'm backing out of stuff or I'm accepting stuff. And then it's vice versa if I'm on the other side.
Right, right.
Uh,
I
we're
get that.
we're we're old.
We are old, especially when you start thinking about all the different consoles that you've played through. It's just
Yeah. Well, the fact that you were just like, my friend rented it from the video store.
like Hey, I am forever a video store kid fiend. I think that's the biggest reason why I'm such a fanboy for the Boomstick Video podcast. It's just because, that's all about the video store lifestyle, man.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I do like, man, I think the first few episodes of the show are going to be us reliving a little bit
Yep.
of our history, because I don't talk video games with too many people. So we'll probably just kind of let loose, but,
Let it go where it goes, man. That's where the conversations are. That's where the best conversations happen. I'm very anti-scripting when it comes to
oh yeah.
podcasting for sure.
Yeah.
And as Dave said, we're still kind of feeling our way through the format of this. I'm sure at some point we'll have a bumper for this next segment, but for right now, so what we're going to do is we have asked some questions from the community for our Ask a DM segment coming up. But first, let's go ahead and have a commercial for our Culture Box network that I guess Geek Devotions is a part of, Comm Talk is a part of. I have the hardest time remembering to put in commercials, so Dallas and Celeste will be super excited that I remembered on this episode. So we'll see you on the other side of the commercial. All right, and welcome back to Casual Gamer Society. Want to encourage you to go out there and totally support that. We are really into whatever commercial that was, and we hope you will be too. So, without further ado, we have several questions that for our Ask a DM section. If you have a question for our Ask a DM section to add to our list of questions, uh, feel free to hit us up on either the Discord or the Geek Devotions Facebook uh, group, and you could have your question read on here. And we are going to I don't know, interact with you in somehow. We haven't quite figured this out. Um, so how many questions do you want to do, Dave? Because we've got lots.
Let's do two. Let's start that way. We'll start out soft.
Uh, we can say it soft, but I have the ultimate. I have the ultimate question you would expect to hear on this podcast when it comes to D&D. Uh, coming from Michael Stanland, how do you respond when other Christians say that D&D is evil?
Boy, that's a good one. I mean, we've talked.
We talked about this on one of the last episodes of Geek This. We've talked
Yeah,
about it on Playing Games with Strangers a little bit.
yeah, we did an AMA, and Ask Me Anything, for our other show, Playing Games with Strangers, and we both grew up kind of in the era of satanic panic
Yeah.
kind of thing, and we're we're far removed from that now. I think obviously we've been playing D&D as a podcast for 2 years now, so I guess for 3, well,
3 years.
I guess 2 for me. I'm coming up on my 2-year
Okay.
playing games anniversary. uh I guess for me, I'm not going to be a person that's gonna fight about it. If somebody thinks that playing D&D is evil, I'm gonna stop and just be like, well, why? I want to get their opinion because they may have those preconceived notions that we had when we were or that our parents had when we were kids. That's kind of my first um that's the first thing that I will always do if somebody is very adamantly against something that I'm doing is like, okay, well, what's your opinion on it? And let's have a conversation about it.
Mhm.
Um, that's going to be my go-to.
For me, when someone tells me that D&D is evil, the first thing I think that's going to end up coming out of my mouth would probably be, okay, give me some non-anecdotal evidence. You know, give me a reason outside of someone told you it was, or you heard that something. It's just like, let's take it to the source books. I'll pull out my D&D source books. Point to the section that says that this is demonic.
Right.
And I've found in a lot of cases that the people who still adhere to the D&D is evil idea are the people who don't really know anything about the game, and they're just hanging on to a concept that they've either had beaten into them when they were kids during the 1980s satanic panic, or it's a default stance for them. Because what people don't realize is that Dungeons and Dragons, like, it's just like if you were to sit down and watch grade schoolers, quote, play with their toys, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's just the only difference is that you throw some math and dice in there. So you don't know exactly how certain situations are going to go. You throw the dice to determine how things go, and you have to react to a changing situation.
Mhm.
It's all the difference is between your kids playing with your kids playing in D&D is you add math and dice. So it's just like if you allow your children to play make believe with each other, you're basically letting them play D&D or
Yeah.
tabletop role playing in general.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, all that said, not to say that uh, a tabletop role playing game like D&D, I mean, we've played Call of Cthulhu, which is a
Mm-hmm.
much darker setting. Um, those could be used in, maybe a non-Christian way. I mean, I don't know how you want to put that, but sure, like people are going to make of it what they make of it.
Mm-hmm.
I know for us at playing games, like it's a way for us to tell stories and a way for us to um you know experience. How do I want to say this? I had it perfectly phrased in my head, but it's just a storytelling device for us, and it's an acting thing. We're all actors, for voice actors to some degree, and it's also just hanging out with internet friends, um and just having a good time. I think sometimes you can get a little too um can I say legalistic, where you're just a little too building the boundaries a little too firm, and you get very strict about what is and is not allowed. And that will, that goes back to what John said and what I said is, what is your reasoning for saying that D&D or tabletop role playing games are evil?
Mm-hmm.
uh, been doing it this long, and I don't know, I haven't noticed anything
I've
evil.
never worshipped Satan.
Right, right.
um and, and that goes as far as to say is I'm not trying to proselytize anybody with D&D. If it's not your thing, that's fine.
Yep.
People are going to have convictions about things, and this goes back to something that I've said for years. Is like there's a difference between commandments and convictions. Commandments are universal, convictions are personal. And it's just like if you feel a conviction about playing D&D, great, honor that conviction. you
Right.
know then then it is your method of serving God by not by abstaining from playing D&D. That's fine.
Yeah.
But you can't judge people based off of your own convictions either, because I don't have a conviction about playing D&D.
Yeah.
I have my reasonings, and you can't go to scriptures where it says thou shalt not roll for Thou shalt not roll to defeat thine AC,
Right.
or
Yeah.
it's just there. It's not there.
Right. And I mean
And
that kind of that does tie in with like the video game portion of the show where, like there are some games that, you may have convictions about, maybe it's like, well, I don't play games where you shoot people, you know, but I've played games like that for many, many years and it doesn't bother me, but I know that it bothers my wife. She doesn't watch me play games like that or, so it's all kind of like you said, conviction versus commandment. I like that analogy by
I'm glad I could throw that in there for you then.
the way.
You know what? I'm going to pull this one out because this is one of your relatives who submitted this question.
Oh no.
Amanda Clements writes in and asks, "What do you do when your brain freezes mid session?"
As a DM, I mean this is ask a DM.
Well, I mean, you
Oof,
could answer it as a player. I mean, ask a DM is just what we named the session.
that's true.
This is
As a
just an excuse.
player,
This is just an excuse to talk about D&D on the show.
right. Uh we don't need an excuse. We could do it. Uh yeah, I as a player, uh John has experienced a lot of Dave freezing and taking way too long to come up with a decision. Uh, so I just freeze and it's just kind of that hold the finger up and not the finger, but my index finger just like, hold on, I'm working on something. It's just taking a little bit for the squirrel to get the nut. As a DM, I'm actually a little bit more on my toes and I can roll with it because I'm getting to make up the rules. Like there's nobody telling me I can't do it. So, uh, like I've had those experiences where I'll have a player like throw like just this weird I'm going to do this thing. And I'm like, okay, all right, go ahead and do it. Now go ahead and roll a persuasion check. And, that I think it's just easier as a DM to get past that stuck point because there is nobody telling you, well, you can't really do that.
Well, actually,
Right.
I hate that. Uh,
They don't Donatello you.
for me as a player, when I brain freeze, I take a step back because D&D is such a collaborative situation. I'll take a step back from the center staging or whatever, and just allow someone else to take control of the screen. Um, and I'll let the brain freeze happen in game. I'll be like, my character freezes up and just stares off into space, and then I'll listen to what everybody else does in the scene, and that gives me a chance. That gives me some buffer to work with. Oh yeah, I was going to do this, or it gives me something to go another start off point. And I do something very similar when I'm DMing. If I run aground and I'm like, I'm not sure where to go from here, um, I'll I'll put my players in a situation where they have to RP with each other a little bit, and then I'll listen to what they're saying, and then I'll build what I'm going to do around what they say. Because again, just letting them give me some bufferage to figure out where we're going to go. And the funny thing is you'll if now that I've said that, if you listen to certain episodes of Playing Games with Strangers, you can hear me do that on the show a couple times. There's been a few times where we've left off some of our recording sessions, and I'll have no idea where to go after that session. Like, decisions are made, and it's just like, I don't know what to do with this. And I'll be like, okay, you guys are in the yawning portal, um, around a table, and after the last session trying to figure out where we're going to go going forward. And that's literally me saying, you guys got to tell me where we're going with this because I have no idea.
Right. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, my players they're just kind of like, you know, okay, so we're awake. Is there anybody around that I can talk to? Uh, yeah, I guess. Here's Bob, And then they talk to Bob and I let them just kind of go and do and the DM stuff.
Yeah.
No,
I and I know we said two questions, but I'm going to throw this out there anyway because I'm curious because you and I have very different DMing experiences. Because I DM on a podcast, and you DM with mostly new people
Yeah.
to D&D. Do you First of all, do you know what the Matt Mercer effect is?
Generally, uh, essentially thinking that you have to be very dramatic and animated and huge storytelling sections of your game.
And meticulous prep, and you always
Right.
have something prepared. And have you experienced the Matt Mercer effect with your at your table, as far as people have those expectations of you and of Dungeons and Dragons?
Luckily, my players have not really had those expectations. Um, I would say I'm actually kind of surprised. Like their introduction to D&D was through playing games. Um, so
That
they've used that as kind of what they look at,
Oh
but they're
God,
not
you're
role
getting the
play
John
heavy.
Haryu effect. Ugh, I'm so sorry.
No, no, no. It's actually kind of interesting. Like my players don't feel that way, but sometimes I feel that. Sometimes I feel like, okay, well, if I don't have, 10 potential hooks ready, then everything is just going to go off the rails and, I'm not going to be able to get where we need to go by when I think we need to get there.
I, I can appreciate that perspective, because I don't think I've ever really experienced the Mercer effect from our crew at Playing Games with Strangers. I've more kind of put myself, especially at the very beginning of the show. I think I've put myself in those situations where I have those expectations on myself. Like, it's my responsibility to make sure everybody is having fun and are role playing, and I have to have all these hooks. And oh my god, I don't have a battle for today's episode, and what am I going to do about
Right.
that? And and it's just like, I think I DMing became such a phenomenally more enjoyable thing for me when I just let that go.
Yeah.
um, and fell back on my uh, 4 years of theater that I took in high school, and just learn to go with the flow, learn to flow with the story rather than trying to have everything prepared. I mean, granted, yes, there'll be moments where I don't have maps ready for what people want to do, and that's okay. Because
Yeah.
when you're in a podcast, you can edit the setup out, and we
Right.
have done that before.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
and and it's just like, yes, you, as a part of the DM player contract, it is your responsibility to make sure everybody at the table's having fun, but everybody includes yourself as well. So
Yeah.
um,
Absolutely.
I will say I'm a little bit uncomfortable now, knowing that playing games with strangers was everybody at your table's first experience with D&D. That makes me feel a little bit weird, but
Why?
I don't know. I don't.
No, I think honestly, I think, and I know that I'm biased because I'm a very integral part of the show. Like I've edited a lot of the show over the last couple of years. And I'm a player, but I think we have a really good show on our hands. And um, just talking to my players who are all family, like they're very curious about, they understand it like we're creating a podcast and that our home game is different. So they're always asking, like, they ask those behind the scenes questions, like, so you guys, like, now Amanda, of course, like she watches this live, so she gets to hear all of it. But I do get those questions of like, you know, have you guys ever had to like, go back and like redo a scene or something like that? Maybe once, not very
I don't
often though.
I don't think we've ever done that. And it's just like, because it's hard to catch that moment again, because
Yeah.
there's a certain thing to be said about having to process those
Yeah.
feelings and act through them at the same time.
Yeah.
So
And I think their experience being playing games versus something like that's high production like Critical Role,
mhm,
um I think they had a really good expectation of just going with things.
mhm.
Um they weren't really worried about the theatrics or even role playing necessarily, which is weird because that's a big thing of what our show is. And this is kind of becoming a backdoor advertisement for that show.
This show is brought to you by Playing Games with Strangers. Check us out every other Friday night.
So, but yeah, I don't think you have anything to worry about. I would
I know
say
it's just the imposter syndrome. That's all it is.
you're great at what you do.
Stop it.
It's true.
Stop it. We're done here. All right. So if you have any questions for Ask a DM, again, hit us up on the Geek Devotions Facebook group or Discord or wherever you can find us to ask us questions. I'm sure we'll have an email for you to send them to in coming weeks. Dave, where can you be found on the interwebs other than Playing Games with Strangers? Because we've just spent the last 5 minutes talking about that.
Yeah. One of the best ways to get in touch with me if you want to chit chat is go over and jump on the trash fire that is Twitter. I am at Mr. Dave Clements, just MrDaveclements. And that I like chatting with people that are nice over there. And then I'm going to become more involved in the Geek Devotions Discord because I got a show there now.
Hey, you can find me as Nick Foster in Supersonic Pod Comics. You can also find me in my band Mezzanine on Facebook. The Bottom Shelf is another podcast I do. I could run down a whole list of this, but I'm not gonna. So we hope that you've liked our inaugural episode. I promise we'll clean it up in future episodes. But overall, I think as a first episode, I'm pretty happy for a first episode with what we've put out here. So
John and I just have to get used to the one-on-one conversations because normally there's like 5 other people in the digital room.
This is true. And if you've got ideas that you want us to talk about for upcoming episodes, also drop those on us as well, because right now we're flying by the seat of our pants. So until next time, stay devoted, peace and love.